Why was one military division considered Hitler's favorite? What made it stand out from the millions of soldiers who fought for him? Today, we're unraveling the story of a unit that began not as an army, but as a handful of personal bodyguards and grew into one of the most infamous fighting forces of the Second World War. This isn't just a story about tanks and battles. It's a story about loyalty, power, and the terrifying consequences of absolute obedience. The story begins long before tanks roared across Europe. In 1923, Hitler, still a rising political figure, formed a small personal bodyguard unit. This wasn't a division, not even an army, just a handful of loyal men. Their purpose was simple: protect Hitler at all costs. There was no grand strategy, no complex ideology driving them at first, only fierce, personal loyalty to one man. This small bodyguard unit would later evolve into the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Over the years, Hitler nurtured it like a personal creation. He selected its members, designed its uniforms, and followed its progress with an almost obsessive interest. To him, this wasn't just another fighting force. It was his shield, his pride, and a living symbol of the loyalty he demanded from everyone. As Nazi power grew, so did this unit. It was a mirror reflecting the regime's own expansion. By 1933, the year Hitler became chancellor, it was elevated to a full-fledged regiment. By 1939, on the eve of war, it was a complete, motorized fighting formation. And during the war, it underwent its most significant transformation, becoming an elite panzer division equipped with the deadliest tanks, powerful artillery, and swift armored vehicles of the German war machine. Hitler watched its rise with immense personal satisfaction. It was like seeing his own idea grow claws and fire. This deep, personal connection is what many historians believe made it his favorite. Whenever Hitler demanded absolute, unquestioning obedience, the Leibstandarte answered the call. Whenever he needed a force to lead by example, to be the spearhead of an attack, they marched first. Their motto was "Mein Ehrheit true," which means "my honor is loyalty." And for them, that loyalty was directed to one person and one person alone. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, and the world is plunged into war. The Blitzkrieg, the lightning war, thunders across Europe with terrifying speed and efficiency. And which unit is at the very front of this storm? Yes, the Leibstandarte. From the fields of Poland to the streets of France, from the mountains of the Balkans to the vast, frozen plains of the Eastern Front, this division fought in some of the war's most brutal and decisive chapters. They were tasked with the toughest objectives, capturing strategic bridges before they could be destroyed, smashing through heavily fortified defenses, and rolling through towns and cities like a steel storm. Hitler saw their victories as personal triumphs, as undeniable proof of his own genius and the superiority of his ideology. To him, the Leibstandarte was more than just a division. It was the sword of the Reich, the physical embodiment of his will to conquer. Their battlefield successes were broadcast across Germany, turning them into military celebrities and reinforcing their elite status. But this admiration came with a chilling and dark reality. The Leibstandarte wasn't just famous for its combat prowess, it was notorious. Behind the battlefield victories lay a horrifying record of war crimes, the execution of civilians and prisoners of war, and a level of ruthless brutality that history has not forgotten. From the Malmedy massacre, during the Battle of the Bulge, to atrocities committed on the Eastern Front, their path was stained with blood that had nothing to do with combat. War does not create heroes, only consequences. Historians today are very careful to warn us not to view this division through a lens of admiration for its military skill. Instead, they urge us to see it with caution, as a sobering reminder of what blind loyalty to a dictator and a criminal ideology can create. It shows how elite training and battlefield effectiveness can be twisted to serve the most evil of purposes. The Leibstandarte's legacy is a dual one of military effectiveness and one of profound inhumanity. In 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. This was a campaign fueled by hubris, ideological hatred, and a fatal underestimation of the enemy. It was meant to be a swift victory, but it quickly devolved into one of the most grueling and costly conflicts in human history. And once again, the Leibstandarte was pushed to the very front lines. Here, on the Eastern Front, they faced a new kind of war. They endured bitter, sub-zero winters that froze machines and men alike. They faced the endless, unyielding resistance of the Red Army, fighting for every inch of their homeland. On this battlefield, survival itself was a victory. In this crucible of fire and ice, Hitler's trust in this division grew even stronger. When a critical defensive line was about to break, he sent the Leibstandarte to hold it. When he needed a desperate breakthrough to encircle a Soviet army, he relied on them to spearhead the assault. And the men of the Leibstandarte fought relentlessly, driven by the belief that their loyalty to him gave their struggle purpose, no matter how brutal or hopeless the situation became. Over time, the Nazi propaganda machine worked tirelessly to polish the image of this division. It was portrayed as an order of warrior knights, an elite force of supermen, unstoppable in battle and loyal to the Führer until death. Posters depicted them as heroic figures, speeches praised their every victory, and newsreels showed them as the ultimate expression of Aryan strength. A powerful myth was carefully constructed around them. But behind every myth lies a truth, and the truth here is harsh. This division served evil ambitions. It carried out criminal orders without question. It became a finely honed weapon of destruction in the hands of a tyrant. The Leibstandarte was Hitler's favorite division not just for its skill on the battlefield, but because it perfectly symbolized what he desired most from his people: absolute, unquestioning, and fanatical obedience. They were the ultimate tool of his will, and he saw them as a direct extension of himself. But as the war dragged on, the foundations of the Third Reich began to crack. Germany's immense power, which had once seemed unstoppable, started to crumble. The Eastern Front, which had consumed millions of lives, collapsed under the weight of Soviet counteroffensives. In the West, the Allies landed in Normandy and began the liberation of France. The Reich, which had once dreamed of world domination, was now fighting a desperate battle for its own survival. And the Leibstandarte, his favorite division, bled with it. It was no longer the pristine, all-conquering force it had once been. Its tanks were destroyed, its veteran soldiers were lost in staggering numbers, and the morale of its new recruits was shattered by the reality of a losing war. By 1945, the mighty division was exhausted, a mere shadow of the force that Hitler had once praised with such pride. In the end, their famous loyalty could not save the regime. Blind obedience could not rewrite the reality of strategic failure and overwhelming enemy force. History crushed the dictator in his bunker, and it crushed his favorite division on the battlefields of Europe. So, what was Hitler's favorite division? All evidence and most historians point to the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, his personal guard that became a frontline army. But more important than simply naming the unit is understanding the lesson its history leaves behind. It teaches us that power built on fear, terror, and a cult of personality cannot last. It shows that loyalty, when divorced from conscience and morality, becomes a weapon for evil. And it reminds us that history, no matter how dark or uncomfortable, must be remembered. We must study these events not to glorify them, but to understand them, so that such nightmares are never repeated again. Thank you for watching. If you found this historical analysis interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the past. We'll see you in the next one.